Imagine discovering that what you consider pocket change could buy the most advanced warship in the galaxy. Imagine learning that your species' throwaway technology could revolutionize entire civilizations. Now imagine the terror in alien eyes when they realize that humanity has been holding back, not out of mercy, but because they simply didn't think anyone else was worth the effort. This is the story of how the galaxy learned to fear not human aggression, but human indifference. Because sometimes, the most terrifying enemy is the one who could destroy you without even noticing you exist. The galactic trade station Nexus 7 hummed with the constant buzz of 1,000 different species conducting business across the spiral arm. Floating platforms carried goods between massive cargo holds, while holographic displays flickered with exchange rates for everything from rare minerals to exotic technologies. In the middle of this controlled chaos, a human sat at a small cafe table, completely unaware that he was about to accidentally start an interstellar incident. Marcus Chen sipped his coffee and scrolled through his personal tablet, reviewing the quarterly reports from his small shipping company. Earth-based businesses had been expanding into the galactic market for only 3 years now, and most humans were still figuring out the exchange rates between Earth credits and the various alien currencies. Marcus was no exception. He'd come to Nexus 7 to pick up a shipment of Altarian silk and maybe grab some spare parts for his freighter. At the table next to him, 3 Zenthari merchants were having what sounded like an increasingly heated discussion. The Zenthari were a proud warrior race, standing nearly 8 feet tall with chitinous exoskeletons that gleamed under the station's artificial lighting. Their species had controlled this sector of space for over 2 centuries, and their military might was legendary throughout the galaxy. "The hegemony grows bolder," hissed Kethvar, his mandibles clicking with agitation. "3 more border worlds have fallen to their advance. Our fleets cannot hold them back much longer." His companion Zektau slammed a clawed hand on the table. "The Council of Elders refuses to authorize the construction of new dreadnoughts. They say the cost is too high, that we cannot afford the materials needed for proper ship hulls and weapon systems." The third Zenthari, an older warrior named Grixnol, leaned forward conspiratorially. "I have heard whispers from the outer colonies. Some speak of approaching the humans for assistance." This statement caused both younger Zenthari to rear back in shock. Kethvar's eyes widened. "The humans? But they are newcomers, barely past their first interstellar flight. What could they possibly offer us that we do not already possess?" Grixnol's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You have not seen the reports from our intelligence division. The humans' technology is different. Their material science, their manufacturing processes, their energy systems, they achieve results that should be impossible with such primitive-appearing equipment." Marcus couldn't help but overhear the conversation, partly because the Zenthari were terrible at whispering, and partly because they were speaking in galactic standard rather than their native tongue. He'd learned enough about galactic politics to understand that the Zenthari were facing some kind of military crisis. Being naturally helpful, and perhaps a bit curious about alien military technology, he decided to approach their table. "Excuse me," Marcus said, standing up and walking over. The 3 Zenthari immediately fell silent, their multiple eyes focusing on him with the intensity of natural predators. "I couldn't help but overhear that you're having some kind of military supply issue. I run a shipping company, and I've got connections throughout human industrial sectors. Maybe I could help." The Zenthari exchanged glances, their universal translators working overtime to process not just Marcus's words, but the casual tone in which he'd delivered them. To them, military matters were life and death, matters of species survival and galactic dominance. This human spoke as if he were offering to help them find a good restaurant. Kethvar was the first to respond, his voice carefully controlled. "Human, you speak of military matters as if they were simple trade transactions. Do you understand the scope of what we face? The hegemony fields dreadnoughts that are 3 kilometers long, with armor plating that can withstand direct hits from fusion cannons. Their shield generators require energy cores that cost more than most planets' annual economic output." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, pulling out his tablet. "Okay, so you need big ships with heavy armor and powerful shields. What's your budget looking like? And what's your timeline?" The question so casually asked made Grixnol's exoskeleton literally creak with tension. "Human, perhaps you do not comprehend. A single dreadnought-class vessel costs approximately 200 billion galactic standard credits. The Zenthari Confederation's entire annual military budget is only 50 billion credits." Marcus said, doing some quick calculations on his tablet. 200 billion GSC. That's about what, 40,000 Earth credits? That's actually not too bad. The silence that followed this statement was so complete that the ambient noise of the station seemed to fade into nothing. The three Xanthari stared at Marcus with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. Other aliens at nearby tables had stopped their conversations and were listening in. Zektal was the first to find his voice. Human, your translation device must be malfunctioning. Did you say 40,000 of your Earth credits? Yeah, that sounds about right. The exchange rate's been pretty stable lately. 200 billion GSC comes out to around 38,900 Earth credits, give or take. Marcus showed them his tablet's currency converter. Is that the price for the hull and basic systems, or does that include weapons and advanced electronics? Grixnol's breathing had become rapid and shallow. In the Xanthari physiological response spectrum, this was equivalent to a human hyperventilating. Human Marcus. Are you saying that what costs us 4 times our annual military budget is equivalent to what you consider a small purchase? Well, I wouldn't call 40 grand a small purchase exactly, but it's not bankruptcy money either. That's like buying a nice hover car, or maybe a down payment on a decent house in the suburbs. Marcus paused, seeing the looks on their faces. Are you guys okay? You look kind of stressed? The stress levels at the table had indeed reached critical levels, but not for the reasons Marcus imagined. Across the galaxy, the Xanthari were known for their military prowess and their advanced technology. They had conquered dozens of systems and held their own against the galaxy's most powerful empires. The idea that their most expensive military hardware was equivalent to a human's casual purchase was rewriting everything they thought they knew about Earth's economic capabilities. Kethvar leaned forward, his voice barely controlled. Human, you speak as if your species could purchase our military equipment with ease. Are you perhaps a member of your world's ruling elite? A representative of your military-industrial complex? Marcus laughed, which caused several nearby aliens to take a step back. Human laughter was still an unsettling sound to most galactic species. Me? No, I just run a small freight company. I've got 2 ships and about a dozen employees. I'm solidly middle class, maybe upper middle if I'm being generous. The tablet in Grixnol's hands began to crack under the pressure of his grip. You are not wealthy by your species standards? Nah, not really. I mean, I do okay for myself, but I'm nowhere near rich. If you want to talk to really wealthy humans, you'd need to speak with corporate executives or investment fund managers. Those guys could probably buy your entire fleet without blinking. This statement caused Zegtal to stand up so quickly that his chair toppled over. Your statement implies that individual humans possess personal wealth equivalent to our entire military budget. This cannot be accurate. Oh, it's totally accurate. There are probably a few thousand humans who could afford your dreadnought as a personal yacht. The really wealthy ones could buy a whole battle group. Marcus was beginning to realize that he might have stepped into something bigger than a simple business conversation. Look, I'm starting to think there might be some fundamental misunderstanding here about Earth's economic situation. Indeed, there was a fundamental misunderstanding, but it went far deeper than economics. Throughout the galaxy, civilizations measured their success by their ability to fund and maintain military forces. The most powerful empires were those that could afford the largest fleets, the most advanced weapons, the strongest defenses. Economic might was military might, and military might determined galactic standing. Earth had entered the galactic community 3 years ago as an apparent minor player. Their initial diplomatic missions had been small, their trade delegations modest, their technological exchanges limited. The galaxy had categorized humanity as a species still in its early industrial phase, perhaps a few centuries behind the galactic average. This assessment was based on humanity's apparent reluctance to engage in large-scale military build-ups or territorial expansion. Most species interpreted this as a sign of technological and economic weakness. After all, any species with real power would immediately begin asserting dominance over neighboring systems. What the galaxy hadn't realized was that humanity's restraint wasn't born from weakness, but from a fundamentally different approach to resource allocation. While other species poured the majority of their resources into military and territorial expansion, humans had focused on internal development, technological advancement, and economic efficiency. The result was an economic powerhouse that could casually afford what other species considered impossible expenditures, but simply chose not to engage in the galaxy's standard military arms race because they saw it as inefficient and unnecessary. Grixnol set down his tablet with hands that shook slightly. Human Marcus, I believe we must discuss this matter further. Would you be willing to meet with representatives of the Centauri Military Council?
Sure, I guess.
But I should probably mention that I'm not really qualified to negotiate military contracts. You might want to talk to someone from Earth's Department of Commerce or maybe one of the big defense contractors. Marcus finished his coffee and stood up. I can give you some contact information if you'd like. As he walked away to handle his original shipping business, Marcus remained completely unaware that he had just initiated what would become known throughout the galaxy as the economic revelation. His casual conversation would be reported up through Xanthari military intelligence, analyzed by their best economists and eventually shared with other galactic powers. The implications of what Marcus had accidentally revealed would send shockwaves through every major civilization in the spiral arm. If individual middle-class humans could afford dreadnought-class warships as personal purchases, what could their military-industrial complex actually produce when fully mobilized? If their civilian economy operated at such massive scales, what were the true limits of human production capacity? More importantly, why had humanity been so restrained in their galactic interactions? What were they really capable of, and what would happen if they decided to stop holding back? The three Xanthari sat in stunned silence long after Marcus had disappeared into the station's crowd. Around them, other alien species who had overheard the conversation began making urgent communications to their home worlds. By the end of the day, intelligence reports about the human economic anomaly were being filed in capital cities across the galaxy. None of them yet understood that they had just glimpsed the tip of an iceberg so massive that it would reshape their understanding of power, wealth, and what it truly meant to be a galactic civilization. The sleeping giant that was humanity's true economic and military potential was beginning to stir, and the galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is not the one that threatens you, but the one that could destroy you without even noticing your existence. In the depths of space, automated human mining operations continued their work, processing asteroids into raw materials at rates that would make entire alien civilizations weep with envy. Manufacturing stations the size of small moons churned out goods for Earth's consumer market with casual efficiency. And throughout human space, citizens went about their daily lives completely unaware that their pocket change was enough to purchase the galaxy's most advanced military hardware. The revelation had begun. The galaxy would never be the same. The emergency session of the Galactic Intelligence Consortium convened just 72 hours after Marcus Chen's conversation at Nexus 7. In a secure facility orbiting the neutral world of Sigma Centauri, representatives from 43 different species gathered around a massive holographic display table. The mood was tense, electric with the kind of energy that preceded either breakthroughs or catastrophes. Admiral Thex Cole of the Xanthari Confederation stood at the head of the table, her ceremonial armor gleaming under the harsh conference room lighting. Around her, the galaxy's most powerful military leaders and intelligence chiefs waited with varying degrees of skepticism and concern. The Xanthari had called this emergency meeting with claims so extraordinary that most attendees assumed it was either a mistake or a deliberate disinformation campaign. Honored colleagues, Admiral Thex Cole began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets in 3 major galactic conflicts. What I am about to share with you will challenge everything we believe we know about the human species and their place in our galactic community. A ripple of movement went around the table as various aliens adjusted themselves in their seats, activated recording devices, or simply prepared for what they assumed would be another tedious presentation about minor trade disputes. The humans had been a source of mild curiosity since their arrival 3 years ago, but hardly warranted an emergency intelligence gathering. Fleet Commander Zix of the Hegemony, whose mechanical voice synthesizer added an ominous undertone to his words, spoke first. Admiral, with respect, our fleets are currently engaged in active military campaigns across 7 systems. If this meeting concerns human agricultural exports or their quaint entertainment media, perhaps it could have waited for the quarterly review. Commander Zix, Admiral Thex Cole replied with deadly seriousness. By the end of this presentation, you may find that your current military campaigns are the least of your concerns. She activated the holographic display, which immediately filled with economic data, currency exchange rates, and intelligence reports. The first image showed Marcus Chen sitting at his cafe table, completely unaware that he was being recorded by Xanthari surveillance systems. 3 days ago, one of our intelligence assets stationed at Nexus 7 overheard a conversation between this human civilian and 3 of our military procurement officers. The human, identified as Marcus Chen, operates a small civilian freight company with gross annual revenues of approximately 2.7 million Earth credits. Murmurs of confusion arose from around the table. Why were they being shown financial data about a minor human businessman? Admiral Fex Cole continued. During this conversation, our officers explained the cost of a dreadnought-class warship, specifically mentioning the figure of 200 billion galactic standard credits. The human's response was to calculate this amount as roughly 40,000 of his species' currency. The murmurs stopped. In the sudden silence, the only sound was the hum of the station's life support systems. Director Vashti of the Nexus Intelligence Service, whose crystalline form glowed with agitation, spoke carefully.
Admiral, are you suggesting that this human's calculation was correct? I am not suggesting it, Director.
I am stating it as verified fact. Our Economic Analysis Division has spent the past 72 hours confirming the exchange rates and cross-referencing them with multiple sources. The human's calculation was accurate to within 0.3%. The implications of this statement began to sink in around the table. If 40,000 Earth credits could purchase a dreadnought-class warship, then Earth's economy operated on a scale that dwarfed every other known civilization. Fleet Commander Zix's mechanical voice betrayed a slight tremor. Admiral, you are claiming that what cost the Zenthari Confederation 4 times their annual military budget is equivalent to a minor purchase for a middle-class human civilian. That is exactly what I am claiming. But the implications go far beyond simple currency exchange. Admiral Thexcole gestured, and the display showed a breakdown of Marcus Chen's personal finances. This human described himself as middle class, maybe upper middle class. Our analysis suggests that his personal wealth ranks him in approximately the 75th percentile of human economic distribution. Around the table, military leaders began performing rapid calculations in their heads. If a 75th percentile human could afford their most expensive military hardware as a personal purchase, what could the truly wealthy humans afford? General Korth of the Regalian Empire, whose forearms were currently trembling with either rage or fear, slammed 2 fists on the table. This is impossible. Our intelligence services have monitored human space for 3 years. Their military appears primitive, their territorial expansion minimal, their fleet size insignificant. How can they possess such economic power while showing no signs of using it? That, General Korth, is the most disturbing aspect of our discovery. Admiral Thexcole changed the display to show a series of reconnaissance images from human space. Our long-range surveys have identified what we initially classified as primitive industrial facilities. We now believe we may have severely underestimated their scale and capabilities. The images showed massive structures in space that the resolution and angle made it difficult to determine their true size. What the assembled aliens had assumed were modest manufacturing stations now took on a much more ominous appearance. Chancellor Drix of the Outer Rim Coalition leaned forward, her multiple eyes focusing intently on the display. Show us the comparative analysis. The structure designated as Terra Industrial 7 was initially estimated to be approximately 5 kilometers in length, comparable to our largest manufacturing facilities. Admiral Thexcole manipulated the display to show the same structure alongside known objects for scale. Recent analysis suggests it may actually be closer to 50 kilometers in length. The silence that followed was profound. A 50-kilometer manufacturing facility was beyond the construction capabilities of most galactic civilizations. Such a structure would represent the pinnacle of industrial achievement, requiring resources and technological capabilities that only the most advanced species could muster. "And this is just one facility?" asked Director Vashti. "Our surveys have identified at least 37 similar structures in human space, with more being discovered as we refine our detection methods." Admiral Thexcole paused to let this information sink in. Furthermore, these appear to be civilian industrial facilities, not military installations. The implications were staggering. If humans operated dozens of massive industrial facilities for civilian production, what could their military-industrial complex actually achieve? More importantly, why had they shown such restraint in galactic affairs? Fleet Commander Zix's mechanical voice now carried a distinctly different tone. "Admiral, are you suggesting that humanity has been deliberately concealing the true extent of their capabilities? We believe it's more complex than deliberate concealment. Based on our analysis of human behavior patterns and cultural data, we think they genuinely don't consider their capabilities remarkable. To them, their industrial capacity and economic output represent normal, everyday civilization parameters." This statement caused an uproar around the table. Various aliens began speaking simultaneously in a dozen different languages. their universal translators struggling to keep up with the overlapping conversations. The idea that humanity's extraordinary capabilities were considered normal by their own standards was perhaps more terrifying than any deliberate military threat. General Korth managed to make himself heard above the noise. If their current capabilities represent normal civilian development, what would happen if they decided to engage in serious military production? Admiral Thex Cole gestured for silence. Our economic modeling department has run preliminary calculations based on the available data. If humanity converted just 10% of their apparent industrial capacity to military production, they could theoretically construct a fleet larger than the combined forces of all current galactic powers. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence carried a weight of existential dread. Around the table, the galaxy's most powerful military leaders began to understand that they had been operating under a fundamental misapprehension. They had assumed that their own civilizations represented the upper limits of what was possible in terms of industrial capacity and military potential. The discovery that humanity casually operated at scales beyond their comprehension was rewriting the basic assumptions that governed galactic politics and military strategy. Director Vashti's crystalline form flickered with rapid thought patterns. We must consider the possibility that other aspects of human capability have been similarly underestimated. If their economic and industrial capacity operates at these scales, what about their technology, their scientific advancement, their actual military hardware? Our intelligence gathering in human space has been limited by their apparent lack of interest in galactic military affairs, admitted Admiral Thex Cole. They have shown little desire to establish military bases, conduct territorial expansion, or engage in the arms races that typically characterize advanced civilizations. This has made it difficult to assess their true military capabilities. Chancellor Drix raised a crucial point. Has anyone considered why they have shown such restraint? A civilization with their apparent capabilities could have dominated local space within months of achieving interstellar travel. Instead, they have engaged in limited trade and diplomatic contact. This suggests either remarkable self-control or she let the sentence hang in the air, allowing others to complete the implication. Fleet Commander Zix finished the thought, or they don't consider the rest of us worth the effort. This possibility was perhaps the most unsettling of all. The galaxy's power structures were based on competition between relatively equal civilizations. The idea that humanity might view them as so insignificant as to be unworthy of conquest or even serious attention was a blow to the fundamental pride of every species present. Admiral Thex Cole brought up a new display showing human diplomatic records. Our analysis of human diplomatic communications suggests that they view galactic civilization as we might view a particularly interesting cultural exchange program. They seemed genuinely curious about other species, but not in the way that a conquering power studies potential victims, more like how scientists study interesting specimens, added General Korth grimly. The meeting continued for 6 more hours as the assembled intelligence chiefs tried to process the implications of their discovery. By the end, several conclusions had been reached, none of them particularly comforting. First, humanity's true capabilities were probably far beyond what they had revealed, and possibly beyond what the galaxy could effectively resist if humanity ever decided to exert itself militarily. Second, humanity's apparent disinterest in galactic politics might be the only thing preventing a complete reshuffling of galactic power structures. Third, the galaxy's existing assumptions about technological and economic development were probably wrong, possibly by orders of magnitude. As the meeting concluded, Admiral Thex Cole made one final statement that would haunt the dreams of galactic leaders for years to come. Colleagues, we must face the possibility that we are not dealing with another galactic power. We may be dealing with something unprecedented, a post-scarcity civilization that has chosen to interact with us not as competitors, but as curiosities. The intelligence chiefs departed to brief their respective governments, carrying with them the knowledge that the galaxy's balance of power was built on assumptions that had just been shattered. In the weeks that followed, military budgets would be reassessed, defensive strategies reconsidered, and diplomatic approaches completely overhauled. But perhaps the most significant change would be in how they viewed humanity's next move. Because if the humans ever decided to stop treating galactic civilization as an interesting hobby and start treating it as a serious concern, the galaxy would learn very quickly what it meant to face a truly advanced civilization's full attention. And that, many suspected, would be a lesson that no one would survive to remember. Sarah Rodriguez had been expecting a routine consultation when the Galactic Commerce Ministry contacted her small economics consulting firm. As Earth's leading expert on interspecies trade dynamics, she'd handled dozens of requests from alien governments seeking advice on trade agreements, currency stabilization, and market penetration strategies. What she hadn't expected was to walk into what appeared to be the galactic equivalent of a war room. The meeting took place aboard the Xanthari flagship Eternal Glory, a massive dreadnought that served as Admiral Thex Cole's mobile command center. Sarah had been shuffled up from Nexus 7 in a diplomatic transport, and as she looked around the briefing room filled with representatives from a dozen different species, she began to suspect that this wasn't going to be a typical trade consultation. Dr. Rodriguez, Admiral Thex Cole began, her chitinous features arranged in what Sarah had learned to recognize as extreme seriousness among the Xanthari. We appreciate your willingness to meet with us on such short notice. We have some questions about Earth's economic systems that require clarification. Sarah activated her tablet and pulled up her standard presentation files. Of course, Admiral. I'm always happy to help facilitate better economic understanding between Earth and the galactic community. What specific aspects of our economy would you like to discuss? The Admiral exchanged glances with the other aliens present, and Sarah noticed an unusual tension in the room. Fleet Commander Zix, whose mechanical body language was easier for humans to read than most alien expressions, appeared to be radiating something that looked suspiciously like anxiety. Dr. Rodriguez, we would like you to verify some calculations regarding the cost of military hardware and Earth currency. Admiral Thex Cole activated a holographic display showing the specifications for a Xanthide Dreadnought-class warship. This vessel represents our most advanced military technology. The construction cost is approximately 200 billion galactic standard credits. We understand this converts to roughly 40,000 Earth credits. Is this calculation correct? Sarah glanced at the specifications, ran the numbers through her tablet's currency converter, and nodded. Yes, that's about right. The exchange rate's been pretty stable lately, so 200 billion GSC comes out to approximately 39,200 Earth credits. The silence that followed her confirmation was so profound that Sarah could hear the ship's environmental systems cycling in the background. She looked around the room at faces and features that betrayed varying levels of what appeared to be shock, disbelief, and something that might have been terror.
Is there a problem with the conversion?
She asked. The exchange rates are publicly available through the Galactic Trade Commission. Director Vashti, whose crystalline form was flickering in patterns that Sarah had learned indicated deep distress, spoke carefully. Dr. Rodriguez, from an Earth perspective, is 40,000 credits considered a large expenditure? Sarah considered the question. It depends on context. For an individual, it's significant but not overwhelming. It's like buying a nice car or putting a down payment on a house. For a business, it's a substantial but manageable capital expense. For a government or large corporation, it's relatively minor. General Korth leaned forward, his forearms folded in a gesture that Sarah recognized as aggressive attention. You say this amount would be manageable for a human business? Sure. My consulting firm could afford it without taking on debt, and we're pretty small. Maybe 50 employees, annual revenues around 12 million credits. A purchase like that would require board approval and some budget reshuffling, but it wouldn't threaten our solvency. The aliens around the table began exchanging communications in languages that Sarah's translator couldn't identify. The patterns of light and sound suggested urgent, possibly panicked discussions. Admiral Thex Cole regained control of the meeting. Rodriguez, you stated that your firm generates 12 million Earth credits annually. How does this rank within Earth's business ecosystem?
We're solidly middle market.
There are millions of businesses our size or larger on Earth. The really big corporations generate revenues in the hundreds of billions of credits annually. Sarah paused, noticing the increasingly disturbed expressions around the table. Is this relevant to your military hardware question somehow? The question seemed to break something in Fleet Commander Zix, whose mechanical voice took on a slightly hysterical edge. Dr. Rodriguez, are you claiming that individual Earth businesses possess revenues equivalent to the total economic output of entire star systems? Well, yes, but that's not unusual, is it? I mean, the larger corporations on Earth operate across hundreds of systems, manage supply chains that span multiple sectors, and serve markets with billions of consumers. Sarah was beginning to realize that there might be some fundamental misunderstanding occurring. How big are typical businesses in your economies? The answer came from Chancellor Drix, whose multiple eyes were focused on Sarah with laser intensity. Dr. Rodriguez, the largest commercial enterprise in the Outer Rim Coalition, generates approximately 100 million galactic standard credits annually. This entity employs over 2 million beings and controls industrial facilities across 17 star systems. Sarah did some quick math. That's about 20,000 Earth credits annually. That's actually pretty small. On Earth, that would be classified as a small local business, maybe a restaurant or a specialty shop. The sound that emerged from General Korth's throat translator was something between a growl and a whimper. You are saying that what we consider our most successful commercial achievement would rank as a small local business on Earth? I mean, no offense intended, but yeah, that's a very modest revenue stream by Earth standards. Sarah was starting to feel like she was missing some crucial context. Can I ask why you're so interested in these economic comparisons? Are you looking to establish trade partnerships or investment opportunities? Admiral Thex Cole stood and began pacing behind the conference table, a behavior that in Xanthari body language indicated either deep thought or barely controlled panic. Dr. Rodriguez, we are trying to understand the true scale of Earth's economic capabilities. If individual businesses on your world generate revenues equivalent to our largest commercial enterprises, what does your planetary economy as a whole look like? Sarah pulled up some basic economic data on her tablet. Earth's total planetary GDP last year was approximately 430 trillion credits. But that's just Earth itself. If you include all human colonies and space-based economic activity, we're probably looking at something closer to 2.8 quadrillion credits annually. The number seemed to break something fundamental in the room's atmosphere. Several aliens made sounds that Sarah's translator categorized as expressions of existential distress. Director Vashti's crystalline form went completely dark for several seconds, before slowly beginning to flicker again. Dr. Rodriguez, Admiral Thex Cole's voice was carefully controlled. The total combined economic output of all 43 members of the Galactic Trade Consortium is approximately 50 trillion galactic standard credits annually. Sarah ran the conversion in her head and felt her stomach drop. So you're saying the combined economy of 43 star-spanning civilizations is equivalent to about 10 trillion Earth credits? That's less than 3% of human economic output. The silence that followed was broken only by what sounded like Fleet Commander Zix quietly calculating odds in his mechanical language. When he spoke, his voice carried a note of mechanical despair. Rodriguez, are you familiar with humanity's military expenditures? Sure, it's public information. Last year's defense budget was about 200 trillion credits, roughly 5% of GDP. That covers everything from basic soldier salaries to research and development on new technologies. 200 trillion credits, General Korth repeated slowly. That is 4 times the total economic output of every galactic civilization combined. Your military spending exceeds our entire galactic economy by a factor of 4. The implications of this were starting to dawn on Sarah, and she was beginning to understand why the room felt like a crisis management session. Oh my. You're just now realizing the scale differential between human and galactic economies. Dr. Rodriguez. Admiral Thex Cole sat back down heavily. From your perspective, what would humanity's economic relationship with galactic civilization look like? Sarah considered the question carefully. Honestly, from a pure numbers standpoint, the galactic economy would register as a minor regional market, like how Earth businesses might view a small developing nation with interesting cultural exports but limited purchasing power. This comparison seemed to be the final straw for several of the aliens present. Chancellor Drix made a sound that the translator rendered as existential keening, while General Korth began rapidly calculating something on his tablet. Director Vashti managed to pull herself together enough to ask the crucial question. Rodriguez, given this economic disparity, why has humanity shown such restraint in galactic affairs? With your economic capabilities, you could have dominated galactic trade within months of first contact. That's an interesting question, Sarah replied. I think it comes down to human psychology and cultural values. For most humans, the galaxy represents a fascinating opportunity for cultural exchange and scientific discovery. The economic opportunities are nice, but they're not really significant enough to drive major policy decisions. Not significant enough, Fleet Commander Zix repeated in his mechanical monotone. The entire galactic economy is not significant enough to drive human policy decisions. Well, think about it from our perspective, Sarah explained. The total galactic market represents maybe 0.5% of human economic activity. It's like asking why a major Earth corporation doesn't completely reorganize its business strategy around a single small retail location in a rural town. The potential returns just aren't substantial enough to justify the attention and resources. Admiral Thex Cole leaned forward intently. So humanity views galactic civilization as we might view a curious local craft market? That's probably not far from the truth, Sarah admitted. Most human businesses see the galactic market as an interesting novelty opportunity rather than a serious revenue stream. The real value is in cultural exchange, scientific collaboration, and the general satisfaction of making contact with other intelligent species. The meeting continued for another hour, as the aliens tried to process the implications of Sarah's information. By the end, several disturbing conclusions had become clear to everyone present. First, humanity's economic capabilities were so far beyond galactic norms that the comparison was essentially meaningless. The entire galactic economy was smaller than individual human corporations. Second, humanity's restraint in galactic affairs wasn't due to political caution or limited capabilities, but because they genuinely didn't consider galactic civilization economically significant enough to warrant serious attention. Third, if humanity ever decided to treat galactic civilization as a serious economic opportunity rather than an interesting cultural curiosity, they could completely reshape galactic trade, politics, and power structures without breaking a sweat. As Sarah prepared to leave the meeting, Admiral Thex Cole asked one final question. Dr. Rodriguez, what would it take for humanity to begin taking galactic civilization more seriously as an economic partner? Sarah considered this carefully. Honestly, you'd need to scale up your economic activity by at least 2 orders of magnitude to register as a significant market opportunity. Either that, or offer something that humanity can't easily produce for itself. And what might that be? I'm not sure, Sarah replied. From what I've seen, most galactic technology is actually less advanced than current human standards, and your production capabilities are limited by resource constraints that we've largely solved. Maybe unique cultural products, artistic works, philosophical insights, scientific perspectives that come from different evolutionary paths. As Sarah's shuttle departed the Xanthari flagship, she remained largely unaware that her economic consultation had just triggered what would become known as the Great Galactic Reassessment. Within days, every major galactic power would be frantically recalculating their strategic positions based on the new understanding of humanity's true economic scale. More importantly, they would begin the desperate search for something, anything, that they could offer to keep humanity interested in maintaining peaceful relations. Because the alternative, facing the full attention of a civilization that casually operated at scales beyond their comprehension, was too terrifying to contemplate. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous position is not being seen as an enemy, but as being too insignificant to notice. The emergency session of the United Galactic Assembly had been called within 48 hours of Dr. Rodriguez's economic consultation, making it the fastest convening in the organization's 300-year history. In the massive amphitheater that served as the galaxy's primary diplomatic venue, representatives from every known intelligent species had gathered to address what was being called the human question. Ambassador Elena Vasquez had been roused from her quarters on the diplomatic station at 030 hours and informed that her presence was required at an emergency session concerning matters of galactic security. As Earth's primary diplomatic representative to the galactic community, Elena had dealt with her share of crises, but the atmosphere in the assembly hall suggested something unprecedented. The amphitheater buzzed with agitated communications in dozens of languages as Elena made her way to the human delegation's seating area. She noticed that the usual diplomatic protocols had been abandoned. Instead of the careful clustering by political alliances that typically characterized assembly meetings, the seating appeared to have been arranged to place the human delegation at the center, with all other species arranged in a rough circle around them. "Ambassador Vasquez!" came a familiar voice as she approached her seat. Senator Patricia Chen, Earth's senior diplomatic representative, was already reviewing briefing documents with the expression of confused concern. "Any idea what this is about?" "My staff has been trying to get information from Assembly leadership for the past 6 hours, but everyone's being remarkably tight-lipped." Elena settled into her chair and activated her translation system. "No idea, Senator. My intelligence briefings didn't mention any developing crises that would warrant an emergency assembly." "Have you had any luck reaching Earth for clarification?" That's the strange part, Senator Chen replied. Earth's diplomatic corps is as confused as we are. Whatever triggered this emergency session doesn't appear to have originated from human space. Before Elena could respond, the Assembly's ceremonial chimes sounded, indicating the beginning of formal proceedings. Assembly President Korthvel, a distinguished Regalian whose four-armed gestures commanded respect across species lines, called for attention. Honored representatives, President Korthvel began, his voice carrying through the chamber's sophisticated audio systems. We convene this emergency session to address revelations that have fundamentally altered our understanding of galactic civilization's balance of power. Elena and Senator Chen exchanged glances. Revelations about the balance of power that didn't originate from human space but somehow required an emergency assembly session? This was beginning to feel like the diplomatic equivalent of an ambush. Admiral Thex Cole of the Zenthari Confederation rose from her delegation's seating area. Honored Assembly, with your permission, I will present the findings that have necessitated this emergency gathering. President Korthvel gestured approval, and Admiral Thex Cole activated the chamber's central holographic display. The first image showed Marcus Chen sitting at his cafe table on Nexus 7, completely unaware that his casual conversation was about to reshape galactic politics. 3 days ago, intelligence assets recorded a conversation between this human civilian and Zenthari military personnel regarding the cost of military hardware. The display showed currency conversion calculations and economic data. This conversation revealed that what the Zenthari Confederation considers a massive military expenditure is equivalent to a minor personal purchase for a middle-class human civilian. Elena felt her stomach drop as she began to understand where this was heading. The casual way that humans discussed galactic economics had always puzzled her in their diplomatic preparation sessions, but she'd attributed it to Earth's general inexperience with interstellar trade. Further investigation, Admiral Thex Cole continued, revealed that the entire combined economic output of all 43 galactic civilizations is equivalent to approximately 3% of human economic activity. The reaction around the chamber was immediate and dramatic. Elena heard gasps, clicks, hisses, and mechanical whirring sounds that her translator categorized as expressions of shock and dismay from dozens of different species. What she hadn't expected was the way every alien eye in the chamber slowly turned toward the human delegation. Senator Chen leaned over to whisper urgently in Elena's ear. "Did you know about this?" "I knew the numbers were different," Elena whispered back, "but I thought that was just due to different accounting standards and currency exchange irregularities." Admiral Thex Cole gestured for attention, and the chamber reluctantly quieted. The implications of this discovery extend far beyond simple economic disparities. If humanity possesses economic capabilities that dwarf the rest of galactic civilization combined, we must ask, what are their true technological capabilities? What are their actual military capacities? And most importantly, why have they shown such remarkable restraint in galactic affairs? President Korthvel looked directly at the human delegation. Ambassador Vasquez, does the human delegation wish to respond to these revelations? Elena stood slowly, her mind racing through diplomatic protocols and trying to figure out how to handle a situation that no Earth diplomat had ever anticipated. Honored Assembly, the human delegation was not aware that our economic data would be the subject of this emergency session. We will need time to consult with our home government before making any formal statements. This response caused another wave of agitated communication around the chamber. Chancellor Drix of the Outer Rim Coalition rose from her seat. Ambassador, are you stating that Earth's government is unaware of the scale disparities between human and galactic economic capabilities? The question put Elena in an impossible position. If she said yes, it would suggest that humanity was either remarkably naive about galactic affairs or was deliberately concealing their capabilities. If she said no, it would imply that Earth had been intentionally misleading the galactic community about their true economic power. Chancellor Drix, Elena replied carefully, Earth's government has always been transparent about our economic data. All of our statistics are publicly available through normal diplomatic channels. If there have been misunderstandings about the scale of human economic activity, we are willing to work with the Assembly to clarify any confusion. Fleet Commander Zix rose from the hegemony delegation, his mechanical voice carrying across the chamber. Ambassador Vasquez, are you aware that your species' annual military expenditure exceeds the total combined economic output of all galactic civilizations by a factor of 4? Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She had known that Earth's defense budget was substantial, but she hadn't realized the scale differential was quite so dramatic. I was not aware of that specific comparison, Commander. Are you aware, General Korth added, that individual human businesses possess revenue streams equivalent to the total economic output of entire star-spanning civilizations? Elena paused, realizing that her lack of awareness of these comparisons was itself becoming a diplomatic incident. Honored representatives, I think we may be dealing with a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of economic development and scale. Director Vashti's crystalline form flickered with agitation. Ambassador, from humanity's perspective, what does galactic civilization represent? Are we trading partners? Potential allies?
Or something else entirely?
The question cut to the heart of the issue, and Elena realized that her answer could determine the future of human-galactic relations. Director Vashti, from humanity's perspective, galactic civilization represents one of the most remarkable and exciting discoveries in our species' history. The opportunity to interact with dozens of intelligent species, to learn about different approaches to science, philosophy, and culture, to participate in the grand community of galactic intelligence. This is invaluable to us. But not economically valuable, President Korthvel observed. That's not entirely accurate, Elena replied. The economic opportunities are interesting and welcome, but they're not the primary driver of human interest in galactic affairs. We're here because making contact with other intelligent species represents a fundamental expansion of human knowledge and experience. Admiral Thex Cole leaned forward intently. Ambassador, you speak as if humanity values galactic contact for cultural and scientific reasons rather than economic or strategic ones. That's correct, Elena confirmed. While we appreciate the economic opportunities, the real value for humanity lies in the expansion of our understanding of intelligence, consciousness, and the possibilities for civilization. This admission caused what Elena would later describe as a diplomatic earthquake around the chamber. The idea that humanity's engagement with galactic civilization was driven primarily by intellectual curiosity rather than economic or territorial ambitions was apparently as shocking as the economic revelations. Chancellor Drick spoke slowly and carefully. Ambassador, are you saying that humanity could economically dominate galactic civilization but chooses not to because you find us intellectually interesting? Elena realized she was walking through a diplomatic minefield, but decided that honesty was the only viable approach. Chancellor, I think the fundamental issue is that humanity didn't realize our economic capabilities were unusual. From our perspective, we're a fairly typical technological civilization. The fact that our economy operates at larger scales than galactic norms is surprising to us. Surprising, Fleet Commander Zix repeated mechanically. You find it surprising that your military budget exceeds our entire combined civilization's economic output by a factor of 4. Frankly, yes, Elena replied. We assumed that any species capable of interstellar travel and galactic-scale organization would have developed comparable economic and industrial capabilities. General Korth made a sound that the translator categorized as disbelieving laughter. Ambassador, most galactic civilizations struggle to maintain industrial facilities capable of supporting their existing populations. The idea of developing industrial capacity beyond immediate needs is considered a luxury that few species can afford. Elena felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. General, when you say beyond immediate needs, are you referring to production capacity that exceeds current consumption requirements? Of course. Resources are finite. Populations must be supported. Military forces must be maintained. Most species operate at near maximum capacity simply to maintain their existing civilizations. I think I'm beginning to understand the disconnect, Elena said. Humanity passed beyond scarcity-based economics several centuries ago. Our industrial capacity vastly exceeds our consumption requirements, which allows us to direct resources toward research, cultural development, and expansion for its own sake rather than out of necessity. The chamber fell silent as the implications of this statement sank in. A post-scarcity civilization was theoretical to most galactic species, a utopian dream that philosophers discussed but economists dismissed as impossible. President Korthvel spoke for the entire assembly when he asked, Ambassador Vasquez, are you saying that humanity has solved the fundamental economic problem of resource allocation? We've certainly solved the basic problems of material scarcity, Elena replied. Our production capabilities exceed our consumption needs by substantial margins. This allows us to pursue goals beyond simple survival and territorial expansion. Admiral Thex Cole asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Ambassador, what would happen if humanity decided to pursue territorial expansion or economic domination instead of cultural exchange? Elena considered her answer carefully, knowing that it would be analyzed and debated across the galaxy for years to come. Honored Assembly, humanity has no interest in territorial expansion or economic domination because we don't need territory or economic resources. Our production capabilities can support our population's needs regardless of how much space we control or how many trade agreements we sign. So our entire galactic civilization exists at your species' sufferance? Chancellor Drix observed grimly. That's not how we see it, Elena protested. Galactic civilization isn't threatened by humanity's capabilities because we have no reason to threaten it. We're here because you're interesting, because you offer perspectives and experiences that we can't create for ourselves. Fleet Commander Zix's mechanical voice carried a note that might have been relief. So, humanity's continued peaceful engagement depends on your species finding us sufficiently interesting to maintain contact. Elena paused, realizing that this was indeed the case. I suppose that's accurate, though I should emphasize that humanity has found galactic civilization fascinating. The diversity of approaches to science, philosophy, art, and social organization has exceeded our most optimistic expectations. As the assembly session continued, Elena began to understand that she wasn't just clarifying economic misunderstandings. She was participating in a fundamental recalibration of galactic civilization's understanding of its place in the universe. The discovery that they existed at the mercy of a post-scarcity civilization that maintained peaceful relations primarily out of intellectual curiosity was reshaping every assumption about power, diplomacy, and survival. By the end of the session, one fact had become clear to every representative present. Galactic civilization's future depended not on military strength or economic power, but on remaining interesting enough to maintain humanity's benevolent attention. And that, Elena realized, might be the most precarious foundation for peace that any civilization had ever built. 6 months after what historians would later call the Great Revelation, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy new equilibrium. On the human colony world of New Geneva, Dr. James Morrison, Earth's leading xenosociologist, was reviewing the quarterly reports from his research teams when his assistant announced an unexpected visitor. Dr. Morrison, there's a delegation of galactic representatives here to see you. They say they have a proposal that could benefit both humanity and galactic civilization. James looked up from his data tablets with mild curiosity. Since the economic revelations, he'd been contacted by dozens of alien governments seeking various forms of assistance, consultation, or simply trying to understand how human society functioned. Most of these requests had been polite but ultimately pointless attempts to gain some advantage from humanity's technological and economic superiority. "Show them in," he said, assuming this would be another routine diplomatic courtesy call. What entered his office was not the usual small diplomatic party, but rather an impressive gathering of some of the galaxy's most distinguished representatives. Admiral Thex Cole of the Zenthari Confederation, Chancellor Drix of the Outer Rim Coalition, Director Vashti of the Nexus Intelligence Service, and several other figures he recognized from intelligence briefings on galactic leadership. "Dr. Morrison," Admiral Thex Cole began without preamble, "we have come to propose something unprecedented in galactic history. We believe we have identified a way to make our civilizations genuinely valuable to humanity, rather than merely interesting." James gestured for them to take seats around his conference table. His professional curiosity piqued. In the months since the revelation, most alien governments had focused on either military build-ups in the futile hope of achieving some kind of parity with human capabilities, or desperate attempts to extract technological assistance from humanity. This was the first time anyone had suggested they might offer something genuinely valuable in return. "I'm listening," James said simply. Director Vashti's crystalline form shifted into what James had learned to recognize as an expression of intense focus. "Dr. Morrison, our analysis of human civilization has revealed something remarkable. Despite your species' extraordinary technological and economic achievements, you suffer from a problem that we believe we can help solve." "And what problem is that?" "Perspective limitation," Chancellor Drix replied. "Human civilization, despite its remarkable diversity, represents a single evolutionary path, a single approach to consciousness and intelligence. You have achieved extraordinary things, but you have achieved them from within the constraints of human psychology and human ways of thinking." James leaned back in his chair, intrigued despite himself. "Go on." Admiral Thex Cole activated a holographic display showing comparative charts of technological development across different species. "Dr. Morrison, consider the problem of innovation stagnation. Human technology has advanced rapidly, but recent analyses suggest that your rate of fundamental breakthrough discoveries has been declining as you exhaust the possibilities inherent in human thought patterns. The data was familiar to James. It had been a subject of growing concern among Earth's scientific leadership. Despite humanity's vast resources and advanced research infrastructure, the rate of genuinely revolutionary discoveries had indeed been slowing. We believe, Director Vashti continued, that this limitation exists because even the most brilliant human minds can only think in human ways. You have optimized human approaches to problem solving, but you cannot escape the fundamental constraints of human cognition. That's where we come in, Chancellor Drix said. The 43 species of galactic civilization represent 43 completely different approaches to consciousness, intelligence, and problem solving. We think in ways that are literally impossible for human minds, just as you think in ways that are impossible for us. James felt his pulse quicken as he began to understand the implications. You're proposing some kind of collaborative research program? Far more than that, Admiral Thex Cole replied. We're proposing a complete restructuring of how research and development operates. Instead of each species working independently within the limitations of their own cognitive patterns, we propose integrated research teams that combine human resources and capabilities with alien cognitive approaches. Director Vashti projected a new hologram showing theoretical research outcomes. Morrison. Imagine fusion power research conducted by human engineers working with Zenthari pattern recognition specialists and Vashti crystalline matrix thinkers. The approaches to the problem would be so fundamentally different that breakthrough solutions become almost inevitable. The possibilities were staggering. James had spent his career studying alien psychology and cognition, and he knew that different species literally thought in ways that humans couldn't replicate or even fully understand. The idea of harnessing those different cognitive approaches for collaborative research was brilliant. What would this look like in practice, James asked. Integrated research facilities, Chancellor Drix explained. Staffed by mixed species teams, funded and equipped by human industrial capacity, but directed by collaborative cognitive approaches that no single species could achieve alone. We contribute our unique ways of thinking. You contribute your vast resources and technological infrastructure. Admiral Thex Cole leaned forward intently. Morrison, we have identified 17 major research challenges that human science has been struggling with for decades. Our preliminary analysis suggests that 11 of these could be solved within months through proper application of combined human-alien cognitive approaches. James felt his scientific excitement overriding his diplomatic caution. Which challenges? Quantum consciousness interfaces? Director Vashti began. Zenthari pattern recognition cognition combined with human engineering approaches could solve the quantum coherence problems that have prevented practical brain-computer integration. Faster than light travel, Chancellor Drix added. Rigelian four-dimensional thinking combined with human mathematical frameworks could break through the current limitations on space-time manipulation. Artificial general intelligence, Admiral Thex Cole continued. Human computational power combined with Vashti crystalline consciousness models could create truly sentient artificial minds rather than simple computational simulations. Each possibility James heard was more exciting than the last. These weren't minor improvements or incremental advances. They were fundamental breakthrough technologies that could revolutionize human civilization. What would you need from humanity to make this work, he asked. Research funding equivalent to approximately 1% of your annual economic output, Director Vashti replied. Access to human manufacturing and industrial capabilities, and most importantly, genuine partnership rather than the current dynamic where we exist at your sufferance. James ran the numbers quickly in his head. 1% of human economic output would be approximately 28 trillion credits annually, enough to fund research projects on a scale that dwarfed anything currently operating in galactic civilization. That level of funding would represent the largest research initiative in galactic history, he observed. It would represent the first truly post-scarcity research initiative in galactic history. Admiral Thex Cole corrected. Unlimited resources combined with unlimited cognitive diversity, pursuing breakthrough discoveries without the constraints of economic necessity or single-species thinking. Chancellor Drix projected a timeline showing projected research outcomes. Dr. Morrison, our models suggest that this collaborative approach could achieve technological advances in 50 years that would take individual species centuries to accomplish independently. The presentation continued for another hour. But James had already made his decision within the first 15 minutes. The proposal was exactly what human civilization needed. A way to break through the cognitive limitations that their own success had imposed on them. I'll need to present this to Earth Science Council and get approval from the colonial administration, he said finally. But personally, I think this is the most compelling proposal I've heard since first contact. Director Vashti's crystalline form flickered with what James recognized as satisfaction. Morrison, there is one additional element to our proposal that you should understand. What's that? This initiative would fundamentally alter the relationship between humanity and galactic civilization, Admiral Thex Cole explained. Instead of existing as objects of your intellectual curiosity, we would become genuine partners in advancing the frontiers of knowledge and capability. More than partners, Chancellor Drix added. Essential collaborators whose cognitive contributions are as valuable as your economic and technological resources. James smiled, understanding the deeper implications. You're not just proposing a research program. You're proposing a way to make galactic civilization indispensable to human progress. Precisely, Director Vashti confirmed. We cannot match your economic or military capabilities, but we can offer something that you cannot create for yourselves, genuinely alien perspectives on the fundamental challenges of existence. As the meeting concluded and the alien delegation prepared to depart, James reflected on how elegantly the proposal solved multiple problems simultaneously. Humanity would gain access to cognitive approaches that could revolutionize their technological development. Galactic civilization would gain a genuinely valuable role in the broader universe rather than existing merely as interesting curiosities. And both sides would benefit from collaborative achievements that neither could accomplish independently. 6 months later, the first integrated cognitive research facility came online in the Alpha Centauri system. Staffed by mixed-species teams and funded by human resources on a scale that made previous research initiatives look like hobby projects, the facility began producing breakthrough discoveries at an unprecedented rate. The quantum consciousness interface was solved within 3 months, leading to the first practical brain-computer integration systems. The faster-than-light travel problem yielded to combined human-Rigelian cognitive approaches within 8 months, opening up galaxies beyond the local group for exploration. Artificial general intelligence emerged from human-Vashti collaboration after just over a year of work. But perhaps the most significant breakthrough was social rather than technological. The research program demonstrated that genuine partnership between post-scarcity humanity and resource-limited galactic civilization could produce results that benefited everyone involved. Within 5 years, similar integrated research facilities were operating throughout human space, each one staffed by teams that combined human capabilities with alien cognitive approaches. The rate of technological advancement accelerated beyond anything in recorded history, while galactic civilization found itself not merely tolerated by humanity, but genuinely valued as essential partners in exploring the frontiers of knowledge. Dr. Morrison, now director of the Integrated Research Initiative, often reflected on how the galaxy's greatest crisis had ultimately produced its greatest opportunity. The revelation that humanity operated on scales beyond galactic comprehension could have led to subjugation, withdrawal, or the gradual irrelevance of galactic civilization. Instead, it had led to the first truly collaborative partnership between species with vastly different capabilities. Humanity provided the resources and infrastructure that made unlimited research possible, while galactic civilization provided the cognitive diversity that made breakthrough discoveries inevitable. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most valuable resource isn't economic or military power, but the ability to think in ways that others cannot. And humanity had learned that even post-scarcity civilizations could benefit from partnerships with those who brought genuinely unique perspectives to the challenges of existence. Marcus Chen, the freight company owner whose casual conversation had started the entire revelation, was eventually invited to tour one of the integrated research facilities. As he watched human engineers collaborating with Zenthari pattern recognition specialists to develop technologies that would reshape galactic civilization, he couldn't help but smile. All of this, he mused to his tour guide, because I'd bought a cup of coffee at the wrong table. But perhaps that was the most human response of all, to find profound meaning and unexpected partnership in the most casual of encounters, and to build a better galaxy through the simple act of treating others as worth talking to. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity's true power, only to discover that humanity's greatest strength was not their economic might or technological superiority, but their genuine curiosity, about others and their willingness to find value in difference. And that, more than any warship or economic statistic, was what would truly reshape the future of galactic civilization.